Good morning to all. I would like to start this press conference saying to all of you that I was surprised yesterday at the state dinner and the lunch too. I don't know if the Brazilian journalists remember this. When the Prime Minister Modi went to visit Brazil last year, we made a research, the song that he preferred most. And we went to São Paulo to try to find a singer that could sing the song that he enjoyed most. And so we did a surprise for him at the Alvorada Residential Palace in Brazil. And it was visible that he was touched by the song that we chose to play for him. I have done already that before with President Xi Jinping when he visited Brazil. We made a research, the song that he enjoyed most, and by coincidence it was a music that his own wife used to sing for him. So we found a singer to sing in Mandarin. But yesterday I was surprised because during the lunch we started to hear a song, and I saw that that song had something to do with us. And it was a song called Disparada, and played by Indian musicians. They played Disparada, then they played other songs from the Brazilian composer Zeca Pagodinho, Deixa Minha Vida Levar, and then they played Asa Branca, and at night, in another surprise, that state dinner by the President of India, they sang Without Fear to Be Happy. It's a famous slogan and of my jingle campaign. I was very touched for that because I did not imagine that they could have remembered the good reception that we did for him. And so they decided to give me a gift in exchange, and it was very important. Some ministers were emotional. Very emotional. They knew how to sing. They knew the lyrics. Some of them didn't know how to sing it, but they tried anyway. But in the scale of 1 to 10, 10 were the ones that knew the lyrics, and others could only get a score of 1.5 or 2 points. Very well. Having said that, we are closing a cycle of international trips that was within our strategy for this third term to reclaim the image and the negotiation power that Brazil had achieved in the world. And then afterwards we had interval, you know why, and now we decided to recover, to retrieve the image of Brazil in the world. And it's with great satisfaction that I can say to all of you that in just 3 years and 2 months of my term, we did more. We created 520 new markets for Brazilian goods. It's much more than we could have imagined in such a short time, because always prevailed the idea in the government that who wants, if you really want something, you go try to catch it. And I told the ministers travel and try to sell Brazilian goods that they can in their trips abroad to meet the needs of the international markets. And this trip to India has a characteristic that is very special. It was in India that in 2005 that for the very first time I perceived the importance of having international hard currency reserves. I came here my first trip, and India had accrued $100 billion in international hard currency reserves. And I came back to Brazil convinced that we needed to build up our international reserves, and we had to have an extra buffer so to avoid that we will be vulnerable to the changes, international changes. And we managed to do that for the very first time, and we left that position of debtors of the IMF to creditors of the IMF, and we accrued reserves in international hard currency of $360 billion, that was the third or fourth largest international reserve in the world in those days. Till today, this reserve is still a buffer, a safety buffer for our country. Do not think that there were not people that wanted to use these international reserves for other purposes, but we believe that it's not necessary to use a buffer that is kept for a certain critical situation that may come up, and we should not spend that money without need. Here in 2005, I came back to Brazil, and in Brazil we celebrated that we reached $100 billion of foreign trade. The journalists that were in Brazil, we put in a container in the front of the finance ministry and was there for more than 2 months to prove the greatness of a country that had reached $100 billion of foreign trade. Today, this foreign trade is close to $649 billion, and I hope that soon we can celebrate $1 trillion of foreign trade. It's just to believe and continue to work so that we can reach this amount. But what is really more important is that when we're talking about a negotiation with a country like India, we are not dealing with a colonizer. Because when you're going to make with rich countries, those countries that are accustomed to deal with many other countries, it's a sort of authoritarianism in the negotiations, not taking into account that the happiness of each nation is that they want to prevail the law of the strongest. With India, it's different. It's not the strongest force that prevails. We are two countries that are in need or in want. No one is above the other country. The difference in religion, the difference in languages, because here is spoken 40 different languages and dialects. The truth is that there's a lot of similarity between Brazil and India in the attitude and in the needs. So when you sit down around a table with the business sector in India, when you have conversation with Prime Minister Modi or Prime Minister Singh, there's something very similar to our needs. And so it's much more easier for us to work and to establish an action plan and to establish targets or goals and to build partnerships between Brazilian entrepreneurs and Indians and invite them to make investments in Brazil and to offer for us to make investments in India. So there's the tone of the supremacy, the tone of who's the biggest, who's the strongest. It's a policy between equals, between peers, which gives me a lot of pleasure and a lot of optimism. It's very important to remember that when I came here for the very first time, the trade between Brazil and India was only $2.4 billion. Now has come the time that it has reached $10.5 billion, which is not yet much. It's for reasonable big economies. And Prime Minister Modi established for me that we have a target to reach $20 billion till the year 2030. So I would like to say here to the press and take notes. Nobody's taking notes. Maybe, am I saying something that is not of interest because nobody's taking notes? Sometimes I think now it's time for me to stop. So let me say something. I want you to take note for the following, because I told Prime Minister Modi we'll reach $30 billion in our foreign trade till the year 2030. This is the challenge that we have to face. We'll reach $30 billion of trade because the economic potential of the two countries is very strong, and the needs of the new industrial sector in Brazil has more need. If we take into account the healthcare industry, we're getting out of this country with 7 MOUs or agreements that were signed, which is something that is very important for the Brazilian press to find out, is that our national single health system offers to Brazil an opportunity to have reach the consumer markets that are extraordinary, not only with medication, but also with modern machines to repair and discover new diseases of humanity. And our policy of the new industrial sector for Brazil And the pharmaceutical industry is one of the most important aspects of this industrial policy, so that we can offer to the most humblest people of Brazil, the poorest people in Brazil, the best health care policy that can be offered for free in a country that has more than 100 million inhabitants, 200 million inhabitants. What is new is that last year we reached the primacy of 14 million surgeries, eligible surgery. The truth of the matter is that last year we started, and now we have a new program that is more experts or specialists, and so that is another service, healthcare service that we're providing to the people. And through agreements with China, with India, and with the U.S., and agreements with the European countries, we do not have any trade preference. Brazil has trade interests, and we will deal with whoever wants to deal with us. If it's a win-win policy, we don't want to take advantage with the trade policy. No, we believe that a good trade relation, a good political relation, a good cultural relation is the one that you give and that you take. Because you don't have an unbalance if you act this way between countries. And in the same way that Brazil is close to China, is open to China, Brazil is open to China, and China is open to Brazil. But our governor, Bahia, that young man, nice man that looks much more Indian than Brazilian, that is sitting here at my right, we brought the general director of the federal police. Wherever I go, the federal police comes after me, because we need to make agreements, and we have to put the federal police contacts and agreements with all countries to fight organized crime and drug trafficking. As we know that organized crime is something, it's a multinational organization. We have to make our federal police. It has to build partnerships around the world in all countries that are interested to make this dispute with us. So that's why when I go to the United States and talk to President Trump, we're going to take our recipe, we're going to take our federal police, we're going to take our finance minister, our Minister of Justice, because if the government, U.S. government is willing to fight organized crime and drug trafficking, we can do that together and to end with organized crime, and demanding from them, for the U.S. to send the criminals from Brazil that are staying in the U.S., or living in the U.S., Brazilians that are criminals. Everybody knows that when you can commit smuggling gasoline, they're living in the U.S., and let's show that we really truly want to fight organized crime in a very serious matter, and so we want to bring back the criminal. So my trip to India is a landmark of a new relation between Brazil and India. I can say to all of you that the natural trend is to improve, and very much so, our relation with India in all aspects, and even with Brazilian investments here in India in artificial intelligence, and investment of India in Brazil, in partnership with our universities and between our ministries, because we are the democratic brothers of the global south that are the most important country, and we have to set the example. And that's why I come back to Brazil very satisfied. And I wanted my finance minister Haddad to come to this trip, because it's important to show to the world the moment that Brazil is experiencing, that many times, reading the Brazilian press, we don't even know what's going on in Brazil. But it's important for us to show to the rest of the world that we live in Brazil, what we experience in Brazil, one of the best moments, economic moments in the history of Brazil. Not by the economic growth, like 14% a year during the so-called economic miracle during the 70s, because it's not sufficient for the GDP to grow, for the country to improve. No, the country only improves if you distribute income and wealth, and that's what we're doing in Brazil. And so that's why we're increasing the minimum wage. That's why we have the lowest accrued inflation rate in 4 years in the history of Brazil. And that's why we have the largest economic active population in the history of Brazil. And that's why we have in this moment the lowest unemployment rate in the history of Brazil, and that's why we have the largest foreign trade in the history of Brazil. That is to say, everything is happening such as it was foreseen and such as we worked for, because it was with a lot of hard work that we managed even to offer to the international business sector predictability, fiscal stability, economic stability, social stability, and judicial stability. And I'm sure that Brazil is one of the countries that has the highest credibility in the international scene. And this is only possible with a lot of hard work and seriousness. Having said that, now I am satisfied to see the Indian press and to talk about the meetings with the business sector. I had an important meeting with the Indian business sector. 7 ministers have spoken before me. I had a meeting with other business sector that represents a GDP, a value of market value of $1 trillion. I talked to them because saying to give them trust that it's worthwhile to invest in Brazil and buy Brazilian goods. And to buy an aircraft from the Embraer manufacturing aircraft company, it's very good. They're planes that they manufacture. Because if we don't have the courage to complement the goods that we manufacture and to distribute in the market, we will never be a country with a strong economy. I am convinced that Brazil and India will have a quality leap forward in their relations in such an extraordinary way, with the perspective to have a direct flight from New Delhi to São Paulo, Brazil. Having said that, my friends, I give the floor back to you, journalists, to remind you that Corinthians won, another team 1-0 the score. That Corinthians is the president's soccer club team of his preference. So please make questions that I can answer. If it's more difficult, I'll call my university trained ministers. So we'll start the questions. Sir, wait a minute for the president to put his phones. Wait a minute, sir, for the president to put his phone.
Doing this press conference.
Can you start again and slowly, please?
Listen, thank you for taking questions. I take you back to the United States, where you are likely to go very soon. On the tariff issues, the changes in the tariffs that we have seen, how do you see emerging economies getting affected by it? And number two, on critical minerals, after having done this agreement with India, what is the kind of discussion you intend to have with President Trump on critical minerals? Thank you.
Well, actually, the agenda that I want to discuss with the North American president is broader than just critical minerals. We have diplomatic relations with the U.S. for more than 200 years. It's a very sound and solid relationship, and we were surprised with the impact of the imposed tariffs, because it was done in a way that was an anomaly, because it was something. You can't just imagine that you would receive such a news through the Twitter, a country to put tariffs against another country. Before that, the ministers of industry and commerce, they would make a meeting to put the tariffs, and this was through the Twitter, so we were very cautious. You know that very well. I have in my mind the idea not to make any decisions when I got fever around 39 degrees. We have to wait for the fever to go down, and then you make a decision. And I think that we made the right decisions vis-a-vis the tariff issues. And some things were lowered by the government, U.S. government themselves, and now they made another decision of the Supreme Court going against what President Trump was doing. Of course, I cannot judge the Supreme Court's rulings of another country, and even less being from another country. But what I want to talk with Trump is the relationship between Brazil and the U.S. We're the two largest democracies of the Americas. We are two men of 80 years of age, so we cannot play around with democracy. We have to take this very seriously. On the phone call, I told President Trump, We have to shake hands, look eye to eye, person in person, and to discuss what is best for the U.S. and Brazil. And there's no veto. There's nothing forbidden in terms of issues around the negotiation table. We'll put everything on the table. If we want to fight organized crime, we're going to fight organized crime. If we should build partnerships with Brazil, if we can explore and exploit critical minerals, if the processing happens in Brazil, we can talk. What we will not allow anymore is that our critical minerals and our rare earth would be exploited as the iron ore was exploited for so many years, and we just would dig a hole and then we would just sell it abroad. No, we want to transform, process it in Brazil. So that's right. We want to create a national council of mineral policies subordinated to the president's office so that we can take this more seriously and dealing with this new wealth that is being presented in this moment of transition, of energy transition that the world is so much in need. So my agenda with President Trump is a very long agenda. It's a big agenda. On my side, I'm going to discuss trade. I'm going to discuss partnerships with the universities. I'm going to discuss about the people of Brazil that live in the U.S., the immigrants, and I'll discuss any matter that he may wish to do, and even investment. That's been a long time that we haven't had investment from the U.S. in Brazil. I don't know what's his agenda, but I hope that after this meeting in Washington, we can guarantee that we started to get a very civilized relation once again that is highly respectful from each country, and that we're not going to talk anymore. And we'll always talk on the phone when there's some need for Brazil and the U.S. to talk. And I also would like to say to President Trump that we don't want a new Cold War. We do not want to have interference in any other country. We want to have equal relations with all countries. We want to treat all countries in equal conditions and receive from them the same treatment in equal quotations and egalitarian treatment. And if this is possible to build with the U.S., I think everything will go back to normality. And this is what I expect of my trip to the U.S.
Luciano Pado.
Luciano Pado from Izami. Mr. President, good morning.
Luciano Pado from the Izami magazine. How are you, Mr. President? Mr. President, I'd like to go back to India. You had many different meetings yesterday, and I'd like to understand two specific meetings. The one you had the private meeting with Prime Minister Modi and with the business people. So more detail with Prime Minister Modi. What did you talk in relation to the geopolitical positioning of the two countries in a fragmenting world? And with the business people later, do we have a figure of how much in investment they have announced? We're talking about the biggest economic groups in India and as a consequence in the world. So I'd like to know a little bit more about these two specific meetings, Mr. President.
My conversation with Prime Minister Modi dealt with our trade relations and the Brazil-Indian relations. We did not go into detail about international geopolitics. I know what India thinks about that. There are many problems. I know that what Brazil thinks, and we have problems that we're more cautious on the Indian side or more caution in the side of Brazil. And we discuss what unites us, and what unites us in this moment is our fight so that our economies will become stronger and we can get out of the situation that we face ourselves. We want to transform ourselves in highly developed countries. We did not discuss that would be a polemic between us, because I didn't come here to discuss divergence. I came here to discuss convergence between Brazil and India. And I have a lot of affinities with Prime Minister Modi. And I didn't even discuss the details of his agreement with the U.S. That's his problem. And as the agreement that we have to make is my problem. I think that this is how we build a trust relationship between people. And it was extraordinary, our conversation. I can say to you that it was a very successful conversation for India, and I think it was a success for Brazil. Because there's one thing that is sacred in political relationship, which is trust. Trust that you have in people. When you have confidence in the other, everything is facilitated and makes things happen. It facilitates the lives of the business sector. It facilitates the agreements that we have made between the ministries, many agreements that we signed here yesterday. And we discussed also partnerships on artificial intelligence. All that, I can say to you that with Modi, I have no issue, no matter, no problem. And now the second thing about the business sector, well, I am talking with the business sector that has already investments in Brazil, all of them speaking very well of their relations with Brazil, all of them speaking very well, that they're going to make more investments in Brazil. So I shouldn't ask them how much you're going to put in, where you're going to invest. That I would be not an educated person if I did ask these kind of questions to them. But I could say to you that for my surprise, that many Brazilian entrepreneurs or businessmen seen the speech of the Indian businessmen and women that listen to the behavior and how they see Brazil. I can say to you that the Indian business representatives are highly optimistic in relation to the investment that they have in Brazil. And this is what I want. And I can reassure you that soon, very soon, you'll find out when they announce these new investments. Let's go to another question. AFP, Luke van Baharen.
Hi, President. Morning. This is Bhuvan with AFP. You've already partially answered the question about possible reaction to the U.S. Supreme Court ruling, because you've taken a principled stand on the tariffs in the recent months about how, you can't have arbitrary tariffs between nations. That is one. And the second related part to that was, do you think a lot of middle powers like India, Brazil, Australia, even Canada, they have realized the importance of working together in recent months, in part because of the tariffs and the arbitrariness that people have seen around that coming from Washington?
Well, the fact of the matter is that for a long time Brazil advocates that the developed countries and the developing countries, they should form blocs to negotiate together. And that's why we advocate for multilateralism, because if you allow that a small country negotiates to a bigger country, with a bigger country, the agreement will always be harmful for the smaller country. This is the experience that I bring from the trade union and labor movement. You can't allow that a worker alone will negotiate with the employer, with the company. All the workers unite, get together, and confront the company policy, or they'll lose if they do it individually. The trade, international trade is the same thing. We stayed 26 years to reach an agreement, a trade agreement with the UE. It took us 26 years. And when I was in the chairmanship of the Mercosur bloc, I told to the European negotiators, Antonio Costa, who is and Ursula von der Leyen, that I wanted to reach an agreement while I was the chairman of the Mercosur bloc, because Brazil had the willingness to set an example to the rest of the world, strengthening multilateralism, especially after Trump announced the tariffs in a unilateral way. So we would have to show that together we can be stronger to win this battle. So I believe that countries like India, Brazil, Australia, and other countries from the global south, as you mentioned, could be together, can act together, because in direct negotiation with superpowers, the trend is for us to lose. We get at that negotiation losing, and since we face similar problems and we have equal interests, we have to be together. This is one of the problems in South America. There's no possibility for one sole country to solve their problems in an individual fashion. There's no way to do it. Why do I say that? I say that because we have more than 500 years of experience. more than 500 years of exile, although all the countries to manage to achieve independence of the colonizers, the truth of the matter, we can continue colonize from the economic viewpoint. And so we need to build partnerships with people that has similar problems as we do and similar interests so that we can add up our potential and then become strong nations. It's simple like that. When I was a labor union leader, I would go to the plant gate and say, well, this here is just a broom, but you can't just sweep with one broom. So I would gather many brooms, and now this is a bundle of brooms, and so all the workers together, that you can't break away these brooms. And this is the same idea for the countries. This is the same thing for the countries. We have to have a forum to discuss things and act together. Otherwise, things will not change. Look, we're demanding for a long time changes in the UN Charter and changes in the permanent members of the UN Security Council, but also changes in other countries. We need to have more people, more countries at the UN Security Council. There's none from the African continent represented, none from Latin America. You only have China from Asia. Why India is not a permanent member of the UN Security Council, a country that has 1.4 billion people, of human beings? Why Brazil is not there at the UN Security Council? And why Germany is not there? And Mexico? And why Nigeria is not there? Why is Egypt not there? That is to say, so you have many countries that have more than 100 million inhabitants, and they could help to change the UN, for the UN to go back to be more representative, to function in a way, because the UN as it is today, it doesn't have much efficacy. It doesn't solve any conflict today. It is capable to make a good diagnosis, but it doesn't have the medication for its diagnosis. So if you only know how to do diagnosis and you don't have medication, then you lose credibility. So it's necessary to strengthen the UN, that we wanted to prevail as an institution of vital importance for the maintenance of peace and harmony in the world. So that's why we want to strengthen with the UN, but at the same way, the economic issues. These days, I've found almost for all major heads of state to propose that we have to give a response to what happened in Venezuela and what happened in Gaza and what happened in Ukraine. You cannot allow in a unilateral way that any country, even though it's a very mighty country, it could interfere in another country. That's why you need the UN to solve these matters. And that's why it has to be representative. So I believe that together, these countries that you mentioned, developing countries, and together with the global south countries, they could change the economic rationale of the world. It's just a will, to have political will. The experience that did not work out, the experiment, is for 500 years. And we want to know if we want to continue or if we want to change something in the world. I'm one of those that want to change things in the world. Camila Xavier from Metropolis.
Mr. President, I'd like to know what you think about the criticism that the evangelical groups have made in relation to the Sunday school. So I'm going to start again. Mr. President, I'd like to know what you think about the criticisms made by the evangelical groups and also the conservative sort of benches in relation to the Samba school that paid homage to you at the carnival. Well, I'm going to tell you something. I don't really think about this because, first, I'm not a carnival professional. I didn't write the samba. I didn't, look and make the floats. They just paid homage to me in a lovely song, which is a shame that my mum isn't with us anymore, because the song is actually homage to my mother. It's her ordeal of bringing her children to São Paulo. I mean, to be honest, I think that the school did something extraordinary, and it's not up to the president to give any opinions. The only thing that the president can do is accept or not if he, would accept the homage. And I did, and I'm very grateful to the Samba school when I go back to São Paulo. When I go back to Brazil, I'm going to visit the school to thank them for the homage, the saga of Don Indo leaving Pernambuco to São Paulo. That's it, really. Next question from Sputnik, Ajit Singh, the Sputnik agency.
Sir, you expressed Brazil's full support for the priorities set by the Indian BRICS chairship in 2026. So what will be the Brazil's specific focus and contribution within this agenda? Additionally, whenever BRICS nations deeper cooperation, the United States often responds with warning and threats. So how does Brazil intend to respond to such pressures?
Well, the BRICS agenda is organized by the country that is leading the meeting, that has the chairmanship. Last year was Brazil, this year is India. And so the agenda will be built by India. We don't discuss the agenda before it starts. What I heard from Prime Minister Modi, he has the intent to mobilize all India, have discussions around the country in India, so that we can have civil society participation from India in the decisions that were going to be discussed at the BRICS. So this is very good. In Brazil, we had a social BRICS meeting. We called the grassroots movements to participate. The BRICS is a formation process of a very strong group, almost half of humanity, half of the world GDP. What we need is to have the awareness that 10 members of the BRICS participate in the G20. 10 are members of the G20. Now President Macron wants to mix BRICS with the G7. And so I know that it's already invited for the next G7. Prime Minister Modi already invited to South Africa, and I am invited for the next G7. 3 BRICS members to participate in the G7. Well, we're going to start to understand that we don't have to fight. We don't need G7, G4, G20, and so on. We are moving forward so that we can build one group. Why did we create the G20? The G20 was because of the global financial crisis in 2008. Why was the BRICS were created? It was because of the meetings that we had with China, and then the meetings that we had with Russia. So we are showing our face to a group that was marginalized, that is the so-called people that come from the global south. Now we're showing our face to the rest of the world, and we created a bank, the New Development Bank, that's from BRICS. So everything that comes from the BRICS is very new. I know that the United States has a certain unrest vis-a-vis the BRICS. But their unrest is with China, not with the BRICS. Since we don't want Cold War anymore, what we want is to strengthen our group. The BRICS, who knows, our group, once strengthened, will join the G20, and one day maybe we'll have just one group. We'll have a G30 instead of having BRICS and G7. We don't need so many meetings like that, and so I believe that we're moving towards that direction to have a more fair international trade. One of these days they asked me here in India in an interview if we're advocating for to create a currency for the BRICS. No, we don't want to build a currency for the BRICS. No one ever advocated for that. What we actually want is to discuss the fund so that Brazil can have trade with India. Is it necessary to use the dollar, or we can use our own domestic currencies so that Brazil can have trade with China? Is it necessary to use the dollar, or we can use the Chinese currency and the Brazilian currency? Our finance ministers, our Federal Reserve and central banks are discussing to find a solution for this matter. It is not necessary. And so I think that we do have the condition that it's not necessary, that the U.S. do not enjoy that in the first moment. Okay. I didn't expect that the U.S. would agree with this idea of the BRICS. But let's discuss the matter. That's it. Just discuss it. Let's have a debate and see if we can manage to do something that is more fair and penalize less, especially the smaller countries. This is the idea, and that's why I am convinced that the BRICS is a way for us to reach a geopolitical balance in the planet Earth. And it's a formation process. Not everybody trusts in everybody yet on the same things, on the same issues, or believe in the same issue. But this is a process. And in this process, I think we're going to build a bloc that will be highly representative and very good to discuss economic policies, to discuss peace. What we're lacking is that last year, $2 trillion and $400 billion were spent with weapons, with arms manufactured. The countries that manufacture weapons are the ones that are member of the UN Security Council, permanent members. The ones that go to war are almost full members, permanent members of the UN Security Council, and it doesn't discuss any of this matter. They don't gather, so it's very difficult to go on like this. It's very difficult. How can you keep peace on the planet Earth if the permanent members of the UN Security Council, that should be the spokespersons for peace, are involved in war themselves? So we have to change. And the BRICS can make the difference. And I hope that here in India, we'll have a better BRICS than the one we had in Brazil, that I think it was the best of all the BRICS. But I hope that in India will be even better, the BRICS meeting, much stronger than the one we had in Brazil last year.
And now, Tiago Yates from Global TV. Mr. President, I'd just like to clarify a statement that you've just made. The American president has maybe his most controversial policy is to hunt, immigrants, illegal, undocumented, documented immigrants, temporary visas. This is a controversy in the US that has led to deaths. Even President Trump considers all these immigrants criminals. You said to him that in the conversation with President Trump, you could arrange to receive criminals from Brazil or whoever. No, you didn't. No, it wasn't actually like that. No. You said, let's talk. No, if I accept you to ask the question in the way they've asked, it sounds as if I've said that, and I didn't. Okay, for President Trump, they're criminals, but you mentioned about having criminals from fuel, those who have committed crimes. No, I don't receive them. I want to arrest them. We blocked 250 million liters of gasoline on 5 ships. We delivered this to Petrobras. This person lives in Miami. We forwarded the picture to President Trump, his name, his house, and we want this person in Brazil because we want to fight organized crime. So deliver this person to us. But it's not receive, it's arrest. Okay, so this is what I wanted to clarify. So I'd like you to explain this a little bit more. How could this cooperation take place? Have you discussed this with President Trump? Or, we have the Federal Police Director with us. Is this something that has been designed as a proposition to be made at the table? No, look, we haven't had a specific meeting on this. Okay, I have talked about this over the phone 3 times with President Trump. We have sent to him a list of the things that we would like to do. We have sent him documents from the Inland Revenue Services. We have sent him pictures, names of people. We have created an organization for fighting narco traffic and organized crime in the Amazon region to fight contraband, smuggling on the borders, organized crime, with the organization of all countries that have borders with Brazil. What I said to President Trump is that we are willing to work with the U.S. in fighting narco trafficking, weapons trafficking, money laundering, anything that can, put those corrupted overlords in jail. We're ready to work towards this. And these guys, they don't live in the favelas, okay? They live in condos in the, wealthiest part of Brazil and the wealthiest part of the US. And he knows of some names that we have sent him. So in this conversation with President Trump, I would like to touch on this. This is what I'm going to bring with me, my federal police. And then they can, bring, CIA, their FBI. I'm going to bring my, Justice Department, my prosecutors. I'm going to, IRS, for him to bring his, for us to put an end to this, because we are willing to fight organized crime. You know, if there's something that we need to work together is to fight organized crime, because this is a multinational, highly sophisticated industry. You know, they have a reach in football, in the judiciary branch, in politics, in, you know, the business community. They have reached everywhere in humanity. So I'm very optimistic in this meeting for us to, you know, make everything very transparent so that everybody knows what we want to do. Okay, we're going to go to the last question. Nelson Guisado from the UOL portal. Good morning, Mr. President. In relation to the U.S. tariffs that have been done away, does that give more weight to Brazil while negotiating with Trump in relation to the sovereignty of South American countries, recovering Brazil's regional leadership? And are you relieved that you have not actually signed an agreement with President Trump, like other countries have done, like India, for instance? I mean, I'm relieved of not having rushed to do things, you know, in a rush. But from the start I said this. I mean, look, we created a commission of negotiators in Brazil with Minister of Finance Fernando Haddad, the Vice President Gerardo Alckmin, and my Chancellor Mauro Vieira. So 3 high-level, you know, authorities in my administration which were put at the US's disposal to negotiate. And what I noticed is that it's very difficult to negotiate, because apparently on the other side they are not really that willing to negotiate, because they think that President Trump solves things with Twitter, and things only moved forward a little bit when I personally talked to President Trump, because he gave us his telephone number, so we have a direct contact. So sometimes, you know, I think that there are people that don't want us to you know, work out in the agreements. And this is why I want to talk to Trump personally. You know, sit at a table and talk to him, you know, in detail about the importance of the civilized relation between Brazil and the US. And of course, I mean, I can't measure or provide an opinion on the U.S. Supreme Court's decision. I mean, that's not my place. We can't do that. I mean, somebody appealed. The Supreme Court made their decision. Of course, he's made some other measures. Somebody else is going to appeal. There's going to have another decision. For us, what we think is that, I mean, there was a relief for many countries that had, you know, 50, 40% tariffs. But for everyone now, it's going to be 15%. So I am convinced that in the sort of Brazil-US relationship will go back to normalcy after our conversation. I mean, we're interested, they're interested. If they, you know, impose tariffs some of our products, you're going to end up having inflation in the US, and this is going to be to the prejudice of the American people, and he knows this. And I mean, Brazil doesn't want to be an Latin American leader. We don't want to be the leader. What we want is to have a respectful relationship in Latin America, because we have decided that we live in a zone of peace. We haven't got nuclear weapons. I mean, we want to live in peace. We just want to grow economically and, you know, generate jobs and improve the lives of our people. And I want to discuss this with him. What is the role of the U.S. in South America? What is, you know, their role? Is it to help or threaten? For instance, they're now threatening Iran. So we need to, you know, discuss how to stop this. The world needs, you know, calm. The world doesn't need more turbulence. We need peace. So let's, you know, spend our energy to eradicate hunger in the world, you know, to eradicate violence against women, you know, which is growing in every country in the world. So this is our call, as it were. So let's look at the good things that we can actually come to a solution to, and let's leave war aside. I think that if it is possible for us to arrive in an agreement, it's going to be good for us. It's going to be good for South America. It's going to be good for Latin America. It'll be good for the world. We need to show signs of peace today. Today, is the moment when we have had the highest number of conflicts in the world after the Second World War. There's all sort of African nations undergoing coup d'etats with the threat of civil war, revolutions, and there isn't a multilateral organization, an institution, that should be the UN, to try and bring a stop to all of this. So we need to be worried about, creating this. So this is what I worry about, and I think that we're going to solve this. We're going to find a solution. I can assure you something. I believe in something called negotiation very much. You know that this sort of thing, the story about the chemistry between me and Trump. I do believe very much that us human beings, we do have a chemical relation. You shaking someone's hand, looking into each other's eyes, for you to be able to talk directly to the people. And if you do that, you can solve any problem. And I do really believe that. And actually, I've been doing this all my life. And I want to continue to do that. And I want to have this meeting with Trump. That's it, really. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I am off to Korea now, and then to the UAE. I'd like to thank all of you for your